Sonic Generations should have set the standard for the whole series, but instead, it's more of an exception rather than the rule. The nostalgia pandering in that game is fine for an anniversary title, but Sega must have thought that's all everybody liked about it, revisiting what was once great. They had already previously attempted this with Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1, and now they wanted to carry on this tradition by creating a sequel to the least popular 2D Sonic game, Sonic CD. Now, I don't mean least popular in terms of it being a bad game, I just mean a lot of people haven't played this game due to it being exclusively released on the short-lived Sega CD. So, whatever your opinion is on that game, I find it strange that all of a sudden, they want to make a sequel for it. Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 2 does not feel like a sequel to Sonic CD in any way, as it expands upon the groundwork Episode 1 had set years prior. Let's get the basics out of the way. Takashi Iizuka and Jun Sonoe reprised their roles as producer and composer respectively, but now we have a new director taking the seat. Makoto Suzuki is the director for this sequel, and if you're wondering what else he has worked on, well, according to SegaRetro.org, the first game he received credit for was the PC version of Sonic CD back in 1996, so maybe he had an idea of how a sequel would function. It doesn't really feel like it though when you play the game. To give credit though, when you play through Sonic 4 Episode 2, it does at least feel like more effort has been put into this game than the previous game, and it's probably due to Suzuki's previous experience with the series. Straight away, the game looks a lot better than the previous effort. Nothing has that horrible plastic look that plagued Episode 1. Instead, we have nice, smoothed out textures that are more appealing on the eye. It's still not as detailed as the original titles though, and can often look plain at times, but I'd much rather the game look like this than the horrible plastic mess of Episode 1. I like the animations more in this game too. They're nothing amazing, but they look cleaner. Things such as the simple homing attack, a spin dash, or Sonic's feet moving in the same pattern they did in Sonic CD feel nice. Tails is in this game too, and he can carry Sonic, or the pair can join together and create a super spin attack. The transitional animation is fluid and fast and gives the game its own personality. They both smile as they high-five and combine for a new technique, giving the game its own charm that the previous one was lacking. In terms of the plot, it's a bit more in depth than Episode 1, but not by much. Metal Sonic survived his defeat in Sonic CD, but was severely damaged and seemingly abandoned on Little Planet. After the events of Episode 1, Little Planet returns, and Dr. Eggman takes it upon himself to repair Metal Sonic, making him a central focus of this game. If you also own Episode 1, you can play as Metal Sonic in the special levels titled Episode Metal. The stages are remixed versions of the first stages from each zone in the previous game, but somehow, they're a lot worse here. The levels are supposed to be more challenging than the rest of the game, but their designs are horrible and more infuriating than challenging. They're littered with bottomless pits, countless springs, enemies, spikes, and walls. They are a chore to play, as the stage design stops you from getting any sort of momentum in the levels. You'll be constantly stop-starting and dying, and you will just go infuriated with these stages. At least there is only 4 of them, and a playable Metal Sonic is always nice. He controls exactly like Sonic, but it's good to have some visual variety amongst the playable characters, as that's something the series has seriously been lacking lately. Anyway, if you liked Episode 1, then you will like this game, and if you hated Episode 1, then you might think this game is okay. That's exactly how I feel. This game is just simply okay. It expands upon the previous release by introducing Tails, but he's not very useful. Sometimes the level design will require you to use one of the 2 special moves I mentioned previously, but they're so situational that it grinds the gameplay to a halt. The levels can be boring. Not a lot is going on here. There's hardly any obstacles to overcome or alternative routes to take, but there's still springs and boost panels aplenty. There isn't a lot of gimmicks here like the previous game, making it feel less like a mobile cash grab and more like a genuine attempt at trying to capture the feeling of the classic titles. And for that it's good. Sonic's aircraft the Tornado returns, but I found the stages involving it to be quite boring. I'm not really a fan of these segments in Sonic games. I find that simply dodging obstacles isn't that engaging. The Metal Sonic boss fight while you're on the tornado is such a drag, it feels like it goes on forever. But speaking of boss fights, they're alright. Except for the boss in Oil Desert. I genuinely think it's one of the worst bosses in the entire series. You're basically just on a Tetris board for the most of the fight, and you must avoid obstacles falling from the sky. But it's so infuriating, boring, and long. The Metal Sonic fight for White Park Zone is a nice nod to Sonic CD, but Generations already recreated this fight a year ago and did it much better. The final boss is quite crazy though. It provided a good challenge and really tests your skills and reaction time. It's quite disturbing seeing Eggman in a literal robotic heart. I was shocked when I first seen it. It's quite a juxtaposition from the rest of the game's style. The rest of the enemies in the stages don't really get in the way and suffer from the same problem Episode 1 had. They only feel like they're there to be homing attacked or ran past. They don't get in the way or offer a challenge, but there is times when Sonic and Tails can get a power up and effectively do a screen nuke on the enemies. It's a bit embarrassing though, as the enemies never offer a challenge in the first place, making the power ups seem a bit unnecessary. The stage design can feel quite empty at times due to the lack of challenge, particularly in Sylvania Castle Zone. Is that how you say that? I guess Sylvania Castle? The levels are so underpopulated with enemies, and when you bump into one, you just breeze right past them, making me wonder why they are even there in the first place. The stages themselves aren't particularly challenging. I mean, Episode Metal is hard, but it's not an authentic difficulty. It's just an obstacle course with the enemy placement, spikes and bottomless pits being ramped up. For Sonic and Tails though, I found the stages to be alright. I don't find them to be as engaging as Episode 1's admittedly, but that's only because the stupid zones had a different gimmick every stage in that game. But I do prefer the stages here, they are better overall. They're hybrids of stages found in previous games. So for example, Oil Desert Zone is a hybrid of Oil Ocean from Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and Sandopolis from Sonic & Knuckles. Sylvania Castle is a hybrid between Aquatic Ruin from Sonic 2 and Marble Garden from Sonic 3. There is an original zone, White Park, that takes place in an abandoned amusement park, which is cool, so I must give them a little credit for that. It's probably because the bar was so low in Sonic 4 Episode 1 that I consider these stages to be better, but they're still mediocre and can't be put in the same league as the classic titles. Differing from Episode 1, each zone features a collectible red ring that is now clearly becoming a series staple. You don't unlock anything special for collecting them all like in Colors or Generations. Instead, you're just rewarded with an achievement. If you want to feel a sense of achievement for unlocking something special, you can try your best to unlock Supersonic via the special stages. These stages are the dreaded half-pipe that originated in Sonic 2 back in 1992. The good news is, you won't lose any of your rings if Tails runs into a bomb, so it can actually be pretty easy to unlock Supersonic this way. Finally, to talk about the music, I just have one thing to say. Did Jun Senoue even care? I'm not trying to be rude, but Episode 1 and 2 are a stain on his discography. They're so bad. I don't get how you can help make music for Sonic 3 and Knuckles and not care about the sequel Sonic 4. Surely you would want to make songs as good as those you've done previously. But to be honest, I don't really blame him for not putting 100% effort into this score, because it's clear the developers didn't really try with this duology either. The Sonic 4 games represent a weird time in Sonic's career. Sonic Team tried to make a cash grab, and then following the backlash from fans tried to fix it with Episode 2, and then cancelled the sequel Episode 3. I think it's clear from these two games that they don't know how to make a 2D Sonic game anymore, and I guess that's because no one who worked on the classic titles besides Iizuka worked on these games, and even then, he only worked on Sonic 3 and Knuckles. If we fast forward for a brief second, Sonic Mania puts to shame these two games, and it shows that the fans know more about the franchise than the company itself. After this failed attempt at creating a new 2D series for Sonic, the latest 3D Sonic game is coming out on Nintendo's failing hardware, the Wii U. I wonder how that's gonna go.